Welcome, friends, to another exciting episode of A VGM Journey. And I'm your host, The Messenger. The track that we're playing in today's show is the main theme from John Madden Football 92, and it was composed by Michael Bartlow. We got fun games, fun tracks, and several listener requests for the show this week, and I say let's get right into it. I want to kick things off with a track that was requested by Heat Override. He wanted me to play the final boss theme from Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, and it was composed by Ryuji Sasai and Yasuhiro Kawakami. That track that you just heard, that was Final Boss from the game Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. It was composed by Ryuji Sasai and Yasuhiro Kawakami, and this was requested by Heat Override. So thank you, Heat Override, for that request. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest has a reputation for being an RPG for beginners, and I'm not sure why that's a bad thing, because personally, I think something like that is really cool, especially for somebody like me who's not super invested into role-playing games. But I think we can agree on one thing here, and that the music is pretty fantastic. And I think with this track, you get kind of a nice rocking, epic sort of tone with the track. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I get kind of a fun vibe from it a little bit. Like, it's darkly serious for the most part, but there's just a little hint of fun in it. I might be a little crazy for thinking that. And this game actually is on my list of games that I want to check out. And I do have a copy of the game, so I might just pop that into my Super Nintendo after this. Maybe. So I just want to say once again, Heat Override, thank you for that pretty awesome track. And now we're going to move on to another request, this time coming from Utopia Nemo. And he wanted me to play Akrillic from the game Plok. And that was composed by Tim and Geoff Follin. That track that you just heard, that was Akrillic from the game Plok. It was composed by Tim and Geoff Follin, and this was requested by Utopia Nemo. So thank you, Utopia Nemo, for that request. I'm pretty sure that I've totally geeked out about Tim and Geoff Follin quite a bit on this show, and that's definitely not going to change here. And just the other day on the VGM Journey Discord, we've had a discussion about the best Super Nintendo soundtracks. And there was a lot of good responses. We got Super Castlevania 4, we got Chrono Trigger, and I mentioned that Plok was a pretty fantastic soundtrack. I mean, personally for me, I think it's one of the best on the Super Nintendo. And I remembered a while ago that Utopia Nemo, he had quite a list of songs that he once played on VGM Journey, and this track was one of them. And he even mentioned in that conversation that Plok was a soundtrack that, as a whole, doesn't totally speak to him, but he does say that Akrillic is possibly his favorite SNES track of all time. And I mean, after listening to it, you gotta think, this is pretty amazing. And I think he might be right. This track, it's an absolute trip. And I think the Fallens, they've had a way with the samples of the Super Nintendo. And I mean, yeah, this is clearly a Super Nintendo track, but it really pushes the limit of the technical capabilities of the audio, and I could be easily convinced that this was an actual uncompressed track on some band's album, and I would believe that. And Plok the game, it's alright. I think it's got a really cool art style. The visuals, they have a nice bright cartoony look to it, and it's a pretty challenging game, but I think hands down it'll be most remembered for its amazing Tim and Geoff Follin soundtrack. So I hate to pick favorites, but Utopia Nemo, you have absolute fantastic taste, and this track was freaking awesome. So thank you. We're going to move on to one more request, and this time this is coming from Hammock, the host of KVGM The Last Wave, and he wanted me to play Whale Shark, the end sequence sad version from Rogue Legacy, and that was composed by Gordon McGladdery and Judson Cowan. That track that you just heard, that was Whale Shark from the game Rogue Legacy. It was composed by Gordon McGladdery and Judson Cowan, and that was requested by Hammock. So thank you, Hammock, for that request. A little fun fact about this track, Hammock played this in his own wedding, and it had me thinking about possibly having some VGM play for my own wedding. And I think despite this being the sad version, I get kind of more of a nostalgic in the moment kind of vibe, which I guess in some ways it can be super emotional and even sad. But I think the nice violin chiptune combo really works for this track. And I don't really know too much about Rogue Legacy, but I've heard quite a bit of good things about it, and there's even a sequel on the way. And that it's a roguelite side scroller game where you're this knight that is exploring this castle. And every time that you die, you start back at the beginning and you play as a different character, which in this case is a descendant of the hero that you were playing as. And that the randomly generated heroes, they all have some kind of quirk with them. Some are strong and some have some kind of a disadvantage. And I'm not the biggest fan of roguelikes, but I do kind of like it as a sort of world building aspect to it, and that they have a perfectly good reason why it is a roguelike and that you play as different characters. So I think that's actually pretty cool. And it's definitely a game that I want to check out and play, and that's mainly because everyone's been saying a lot of good stuff about it. But I think the soundtrack for it, it's really good too. So I just want to say, once again, thank you, Hammock, for that track. We're going to go with something with a bit more energy next. And this is coming from International Superstar Soccer 64. This is track number 5, and it was composed by Tsutomu Ogura and Harumi Ueko. That track that you just listened to, that was track number 5 from the game International Superstar Soccer 64, and it was composed by Tsutomu Ogura and Harumi Ueko. And that's going to just about do it for the show this week. If you like what you've been listening to, have your friends check out the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever podcatching service that you can think of. I'm more than likely going to be on there. You can email the show at vgmjourney@yahoo.com, and you could also check us out on Twitter at vgmjourney. We're going to end things off with one more track, and I really like this one. This is Chasing a Dream from the game Rayman Origins, and it was composed by Christophe Héral and Billy Martin. Have a good week, everyone.
pum pum.